hello and welcome to this webinar. My name is Nuno Calado and I am a board member of Centro PINUS. Centro PINUS in English is more or less the Pine Center if you want. And we are a Portuguese NGO, and we are focused regarding the maritime pine promotion and silviculture, raising awareness on that very important species for Portugal. We are obviously trying to be continuously learning and how to improve maritime pine silviculture, trying to get extra information, expertise, and one of the ways that we thought it was useful is to engage with other colleagues, other countries, other, if you want, forest contexts, and get some information, exchange knowledge to learn. And because we feel that this can be very useful to many of our Portuguese colleagues, and obviously to many other people, and that's why we have decided to promote or to organize this cycle of webinars regarding pine production all over the world. We started for the Pinus silvestris. It was on a previous webinar, and we find in IUFRO, particularly in the Ecology and Silviculture of Pine unit, the perfect partner to help us and to organize and to engage more people in these webinars. So as such, I would like to give the floor to Professor Teresa Fonseca, that used to be my teacher also in the past, for this introduction regarding IUFRO and setting up also the context for this webinar. Thanks a lot, Teresa.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar series, which today will focus on the management of Pinus radiata in Chile. This session is organized, as Nuno already said, by Centro PINUS and the International Union of Forest Research Institutes, IUFRO, namely the unit Ecology and Silviculture of Pine, which I'm currently chairing. IUFRO is a global non-profit and non-governmental scientific organization with around 600 member organizations from more than 120 countries. 9 permanent divisions with several working parties cover key forest research fields. Firstly, I would like to thank our invitee, Dr. Rodrigo Ahumada from Bioforest, for accepting being here today to share his expertise and knowledge with participants. I'm pleased to be joined by Nuno Calado from Sonai Arauco, which has been actively leading research activity on afforestation essays with radiata pine species in Portugal. A note to mention the forest technician of National Forest Institute ICNF, Renato Costa, for his pioneering work with the species in Portugal 4 decades ago. We all look forward to hearing news about the species development in the current essays. I want to thank all the participants for their interest in joining us today, and I take this opportunity of inviting you to follow Centro PINUS and IUFRO to be aware of future initiatives, such as the IUFRO International Conference on Aves and Pine that will take place in Sarajevo next September, and of course on future sessions of this webinar series. To end, I would like to thank Centro PINUS and Susana Carneiro for their fundamental role in the planning and the organization of this cycle of webinars about pine silviculture. I'll give now the floor to Nuno Calado, which will be the moderator of this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Teresa. So now let's focus on today's webinar. So as you obviously know, this is about the Pinus radiata, the Monterey pine. in Chile, Chile has almost 2 million hectares of Pinus radiata, so it's quite an important species. And Chile has become an amazing success story regarding this forest species, regarding management, regarding breeding, silviculture, everything that we need to know about managing on a very good way the Pinus radiata. Regarding some rules for this webinar, obviously you will see that you cannot turn off the camera or speak, because this is the context of this webinar. But you can use the Q&A chat, and if you have any questions or doubt, you just write them all, and we will as much as possible select the most appropriate them to give to Rodrigo Ahumada, our speaker, in order to allow him to answer your doubts or questions regarding Pinus radiata in Chile. The presentation of this webinar will also be shared by email to all the participants, and it will be also uploaded in the Centro PINUS website. So starting to what brings us here today. So I would like also to invite Rodrigo Ahumada, our speaker, and I will make a very short presentation about him. Rodrigo Ahumada is currently the Silviculture and Forest Health Division Manager at Bioforest, Arauco, which is a Chilean forest-based company. He is a forestry engineer, microbiologist, and a plant pathology expert with 30 years of experience in the field of integrated pest management. And within this, he leads and participates in many multidisciplinary teams focused on the development and implementation of strategies to manage the most important agents responsible for damaged forest crops in Chile, and as well in subsidiaries of Arauco in Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay. He is also a leader and active member of technical groups in the FSC and the CERT4, the Certificación de Forest Chilean certification process, as well in different collaborative research projects with universities, research centers in Chile, South Africa, and other countries of South America. He is a research member of the European Cooperation in Science and Technology Cost Action, known as Pine Strength and DROT, and deputy of a working group at IUFRO, and a Forest Pest Consortium board member. Hi, Rodrigo. Once again, it's very good to be with you now on a digital mode. But I invite you to not to join us because you are already here, but to start your presentation. And once again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuno and Teresa, for the introduction, and also Susana for the invitation and organize all the webinar. It's a very big honor for me to be here and to share this information with you. We need to know many different things, and we need to learn more about even Pinus radiata that we use in Chile. So I think we're going to have a very good discussion by the end. If you feel confident to make question, feel free to do any times, because I want to share with you information more than give a talk about Pinus radiata. So I will try my best, and I'm going to start now with my presentation that is related, as Bruno said, about management of Pinus radiata in Chile. So first of all, I want to show you what I want to talk about, some general information about Pinus radiata in the world, radiata in Chile, silviculture of radiata in Arauco, our company. And also, for me, it's very important, some information about the most relevant pests and disease that we have now and potential ones, and some other considerations. So, well, Pinus radiata in the world is about 4.2 million hectares, and 70% of those hectares are between Chile and New Zealand. and then about 30%, 28% is in Australia, Spain, and South Africa. And then just 2% in different countries, in Italy, Argentina, Uruguay, Kenya, and others, right? So from California, where Radiata is original, in about the 1960, arrived to Chile. Just in a very few places, they start to plant Pinus radiata, maybe as an ornamental tree. And then with the time, about in the 1944, more or less, we got about 150,000 hectare implantations in general. And when, with the time, if you look at here in 1974, in Chile, we started with an incentive, government incentive, to grow up the plantation. And you can see the change, 400,000 hectares. And after 50 years, more or less, since 1974 to now, we got 6 times, 2.3 million hectares. It's not a lot, but it's quite a big surface with plantations. Most of our plantation, and I'm gonna show you just now, is radiata pine. If we look at the situation in our forestry, we have a national area of about 75 million hectares. From those, native forests is about 15 million hectares, a little bit less. Protected wildlife also, similar area, 14.6 million hectares. Forest plantation is 2.3 million hectares, where Pinus radiata is 1.3, so more or less 55%. Then we have eucalyptus, different species, globulus, nitens, and also an hybrid, with almost close to 1 million hectares in total. But also the forestry in Chile is very important in terms of employment. We have 110,000 people working in the area in forestry, where 33,000 people working in primary industry, like a sawmill or pulp mill or whatever. And also we have some quite good numbers of exportation, almost 5,000 million US dollar in terms of exportation in forestry product. Well, but Pinus radiata is very important for us. We have, in terms of the tree, we have about 35% of production related with pulp production. Then 50% of that in timber. So it's probably pulp is massive, timber is very defined market, and we consume a lot of cubic meter to use in timber production. So we also produce panels and veneers, and Nuno knows very well that. And 2% of our production is electricity. So all or most of our mills are using the same electricity that we produce with our bio product, you know, bark and wood and wherever. So we have a comprehensive use. So we try to use the whole tree in different type of product. Radiata plantations, if we look at the graph since 2000 to 2 years ago, we have been in about 50 to 60,000 hectare planting per year. So this is the amount of hectare that we normally plant, around 60,000 hectares per year. That means that we need to have a lot of nurseries. So the main companies has nursery, but also you can see in the country many small different nurseries that produce pinus and eucalyptus. And most of them provide plant for small growers, right? So in terms of that area, the log consumption is more or less close to 12 to 16 million cubic meters. And about half of that is the result in production. So that means that we have about 16 in this year, specific year, 16 million cubic meter uses to produce 8 million cubic meter of soundwood, right? The total consumption of radiata pine, including pulp and other products, is around 30 million of cubic meters. So we use about 50% of that for timber. What about the main products, companies, and employment? Well, I mentioned that we have a pulp and paper, sawmills, wood chips, wood panels, and veneers. So a lot of numbers of mills. It's a lot of small growers or a small industry, but the main companies are concentrated in just a few. So we have 3 or 4, 6 few big companies like Arauco, CMPC, and others that they produce the most of the forex export product. So in terms of employee related with those companies, in the sector we have about 110,000 people working in the forestry activity, and 30% of them, more or less, 40,000, 35,000 people work in the last 10 years at least in the forestry industry, like pulp mill and sawmill. So the evolution of the exportation in average by decade, so you can see here the decade. In the forestry, you can see how this is increasing in the last decade until 5,000 million US dollar in average in the last 10 years in each decade. And that's mean related with the total exportation from Chile is about 8 to 11%. So 8 to 11% of forestry product related with the total exportation that we have in our country. So it's quite important activity, economical activity, I guess. So first of all is mining in Chile. Of course, copper is the most important export product, and then forestry is in the second place. So if you look at here, when we try to see what is the most important product for exportation, pulp is for far the large product that we export, and then is molding, panels, and sawwood, very far from pulp, because pulp is massive. You know, it's a lot of tons that are produced in the mills. And also, if we look at the countries, of course, China is the most important country as a target of our exportation. And then the US, and then Japan, Korea, another country with less amount of product. This is the information at least in the last 10 years. What about the coniferous production in the world? If we compare where Chile is located, just to have an idea, in coniferous soundwood production, the US is the first one with 60 million of cubic meter, and then Chile is about here with just 8 million cubic meter. That is a lot, but of course we have big countries with a lot of production. So, but of course, Chile is in a very important position in terms of production. So this is why radiata pine is important for us, because we are in the market in terms of production, pulp and paper, of course. Well, but what happened in Arauco with radiata pine? I work in Arauco, so I want to share some information, some general information about what we are doing in genetic selection strategy, our plant production, how we select sites for planting, plantation establishment. That's mean probably one of the most important activity, how we plant our areas, and silvicultural management. So Pinus radiata genetic selection strategy is based on, started with family silviculture many years ago, where we select several hundred families. From those families, we got the best ones. We got the best ones, and then with the time we moved to clonal silviculture. So from those best families, we use the best clones, and we select the best clone from the best family. So, and this is the material that we use for our plantation. So the best clones for the best site in our field. So then when we got the best clones, we start to produce our plant material in nurseries. So the clonal production, or the clonal plant production, start with mother plants we call cuttings. Those mother plants we produce in our nurseries. She is the mother of the plant. No, she is one of the researchers, but we have here our cuttings or mother plants, and then we produce from those plants in our nurseries. So we have two systems of production: plastic containers that we call Arauco containers, because we developed the plastic shape, and capacity, volume. And we use also elepots that probably you know very well in Europe, is paper containers that probably you are familiar with that. So we use both for our production. And if you look at here, the map, in blue is the production in containers, and that's like an orange or similar to orange color is elepots. So since 2017, we start to produce about 52 million plants, to the last year that we produced much less. This because we also produce eucalyptus. So here is just information related with Pinus. Just a mistake here is not 1,000 of hectares, it's million of plants. Sorry, I'm gonna fix that before you get the presentation probably. But here is million of plant, right? So we produce 52 million in 2017, and then we start to reduce the amount of production because we start to plant more eucalyptus, right? So this is just the Pinus information. So how we select the site, and this is a key issue. This is a really important part of our silvicultural process. So to do that, we cross information in terms of the strategic and tactic plans. So means how we need to plan, where we need to plan, how is the market, what kind of, or how many volume the companies or the mills need for production. So many different type of information. And then the minimum supply requirement, plant available in nurseries. So we need to know how many plants we have in the nursery. And that information we cross with site index. We develop a site index with environmental and social and soils variables, plus LiDAR inventories. So we use LiDAR for inventories or to get information from our plantation. We have an annually fly with LiDAR. It's a sensor, probably you know that. So we measure our plantation, and with those information, we build this raster. We call raster is a map where we can see in the dynamic way where we have the best size to plant, site to plant. So and then we use a soil environmental restriction. Sometimes, for instance, we have communities that they don't like to have pinus, so we need to use for eucalyptus. We need to get that information, otherwise we can have problem with them. Also, we have some silvicultural restriction, like wet, or high elevation or different information. And also we need to optimize the genetic material. So what is the best clone that we need to use? With those information, we make a site selection for planting, a decision for planting. It's a program that we use for to know where we need to plant. And then we start with the establishment. And the establishment, as I said before, is probably one of the more important activity, because we normally use areas where we already have plantations. So we reforestate. We don't have a new forestation. We have a reforestation. So we need to harvest, and then we need to management of the strips with crops waste. We need to organize them. We need to accommodate all the waste, all the residual of the harvesting. We can use mechanizing strip, those lines with waste of the previous rotation, or manual strip that like this, where we have a very high slope situation. So that is really important, because here you can know how many hectares you have available for planting, right? And then it's really important to have a very good soil preparation. For that soil preparation, we use in most of the places. We don't use in all of them, because some of the soils are very good and we don't need to use machines. But we need to use a very good plant program. So here we use bulldozer, excavator, depend of the slope that we have. So in many different situations, we have a many different options to have a good preparation of our soil. Then in the program or in the process, we have weed control. In Chile, we are using drones. We are develop a lot of activity and research with drones. We started about 6 or 7 years ago with the first trials, and now we are using in about 14,000 hectares as an operational system. We also use people, but we try to reduce the number of people that are involved in chemical product, right? Especially in situations like this one, with a lot of slope, in difficult for them to walk there. So to try to keep a safe activity and also without contamination to the workers, we minimize the use of people in those difficult situations. After that, after we make the weed control, we make the plantation. We also have two different systems, manual plantation and then mechanized plantation. So that depends on the slope again. In very difficult areas, we cannot use mechanized plantation. In other places, we use just people. You know, people are very important, but it's very difficult work because we normally plant in winter time, and in Chile, winter is very cold with a lot of rain in some areas, especially this year. We had a lot of rain. Now it's raining very strongly. So depending on the weather condition, we can use different systems. And one of the important issues as well is the fertilization. So to decide where we need to fertilize, we have a raster or map with hydric deficit plus boron available. Boron is very important for the plantation start. So here we have a deficit in boron, but the deficit in boron is related with the hydric deficit. So you can have the boron, but if you don't have a rain, that boron cannot get to the plant because it's too dry. So then with those maps, we can build the fertilization map for the establishment. Yes, in terms of boron, that is the most important fertilizer that we use in the establishment. So we apply this with workers about 1 month later after the plantation. So we plant, and about 1 month later we apply boron, and that it make the difference between use or not boron in areas where we need to apply, like the red one in the map. Well, when we have our plant growing in the field, we need to care about the silvicultural management, and we have two systems or two protocols. In high productivity sites, where we normally have 25 years rotation, in those places, we plant between 1,000 to 1,001 trees per hectare, 1,000 or 1,100 trees per hectare. Here we have pruning, normally 3 pruning. One is when the tree has about 5 years. We prune about 500 to 600 trees, giving them 2.1 meters free, you know, in the stem. Then at the 6th year, the same trees, we go up to 3.6 meters. And the last one is at 7 years old with 5.5 meters. When we have pruning, we got for panel production, you know. So we try one or two piece of wood free of nuts, right? So this is the probably the most valuable product that we produce. And then also we have a two thinning. One is at 5 years old, and we try to keep 500 trees per hectare, the same one that we pruning. And then the second thinning is at 9 years old, and we try to keep between 450 to 500 trees per hectare. In some places, we can also finalize our rotation with 400 trees per hectare. Then, in low productivity sites, we have rotation between 21 to 24 years. And we also plant between 1,000 and 1,100 trees per hectare. This is the average density that we use for stocking. And here we have an auto protection system. That means we have a phytosanitary pruning if we have Cyrex or Dotistroma. That is very common in Chile, especially Dotistroma in wet areas. And then our final rotation is about 800 trees per hectare. That means that we have about 20% of natural mortality or mortality by insects or pests and disease or whatever. And in this case, most of this product is for pulp, and also we can get the bottom part of the tree for sawmill, but most of the trees or most of the production is focusing in pulp production. Then pest and disease. Pest and disease is important in the whole process, from the nursery to the final rotation. So we have some problems in different levels. So I want to share with you some of the most important problems we have right now. So the pests and disease present in our plantations. I put just 6, but we have more. Probably those 6 are the most important. And also I'm going to talk just a little bit about potential ones, because we also have a plan for potential threats. So, well, Fusarium circinatum, that I remember that I was talking invited by Nuno as well about Fusarium last year, but my talk was in Spanish, so probably more clear than now. I don't know. And Fusarium is under quarantine system in Chile. So that means the government make the regulation of the plants that are produced in all the nurseries. So the government need to check every year before the planting season if we have contamination. So they have a protocols where they look if we have Fusarium. And if we have Fusarium, we need to clean the system, and then we check again. And if they got Fusarium again, they burn some of the production. So it's very strict system. And for that, we have also a very strict protocol to clean and to avoid the Fusarium contamination in the nurseries. So Fusarium was first reported in 2002 in Chile. And we had the presence of Fusarium in mother plants. So mother plants are very important because are the key plan for cutting production. So with the mother plant, we produce the plant that we're gonna plant in the future. So if we lose one mother plant, probably we're gonna lose many hundreds plants for the future. So it's really important to keep health those materials. And then from mother plants, we got in plantation in our plant production, and then in the field. But just in the first year or second year plantation, luckily, because we don't have in adult trees. So actually, just to clarify, we don't have pitch canker in Chile. We have Fusarium circinatum. And that because we don't have the disease in adult trees. So the government not consider the first year plantation as a Fusarium established in plantation. It's just because come from the nursery, right? So we can get Fusarium in the, but as I said before, just in the first or second year after we plant. So far, only at nursery level, and one of the reasons because it's there probably is because it's low genetic diversity, and it's just a vegetative reproduction. So we don't have sexual reproduction. So that means that we need to be very careful about new genetic material from the US, for instance, or from Mexico, where Fusarium is original. So it's very important to keep very safe our production, because the picture is totally different if we get Fusarium in our plantation. And then bar beetles, especially 𝘗𝘪𝘯𝘴 𝘳𝘢𝘥𝘪𝘢𝘵 is very important. It's a big challenge for plantation establishment. So we have some mortality in the first year, but also, or probably most important, from the industry, just because they make contamination, not because they make damage, right? It's just because they walk on the timber, and it's not allowed for many countries to get new pests. So we need to invest a lot of money in reduce the amount of insect that we have in our sawmills. So in the plantation, we have 𝘗𝘪𝘯𝘴 in the plant with stress, sometimes in plant that have a lot of water stress, most of them in very dry season, or in areas where we have a lot of very few rain during the spring season, for instance. So we have some mortality because they eat or they don't eat, actually they drink water. And while they drink water, they make the damage, and the plant start with the stress. So the average affected area is about 850 hectares. So it's a lot. And we don't have any option to make control, chemical control, because FSC and other considerations. So we cannot use chemical in the field, insecticide. But the most important, as I said before, is where we have timber. So you can see the contamination. So the only way now is spray insecticide, but we can use sometimes. We cannot use all the time because it's a lot of chemical and it's expensive. So, but the cost for the industry is about $850,000 per year to try to get the control of this and to avoid contamination before they send for exportation. The only way so far is ecological control. We have a trap, funnel trap, to use in the field with a lure, attractive, that we develop in our company. So we develop a lure that we use in those traps, in sawmills and in the field, just a way to get some insect. You can see a lot of insect here. So to reduce the amount of insect that can be in the timber or can damage our plants. So it probably is not the best solution, but it's the only one that we can use right now. And we are very busy trying to use many different ways to like entomopathogenal fungi or other kind of control. Dodistroma septosporum was a big problem in the past, especially in places where we have high humidity, and especially where we were planting about 18,000 trees per hectare. Now we plant 1,000. So we reduce the density, and that's helped us to reduce the infection, especially in young plantation. So Dodistroma you can get in the nursery. And here probably in the nursery is a very good option to select clones that are more susceptible or more tolerant to Dodistroma, like this one or those ones. But we have in nursery, it's not a big issue, but it's present. We have in very young plantation. So from the beginning, you can see Dodistroma in those trees. And then after 7 or 10 years old plantation, you can get more infection, especially if you don't have a pruning, especially if you have a high density plantation, you get infection. Or adult tree also can get infection when you have a lot of weed, when you have a not pruning. This in this case was pruning, but if you don't have, you have more infection. So this trauma is very well known in Spain, probably in Portugal as well. This trauma is very typical red band disease. These are the fruiting bodies, very easy to know. And the way to make control is phytosanitary pruning and plantation density. We cannot use chemical product. We used to apply by helicopter copper, but that is finished. We cannot use anymore. Probably the last application was about 10 or 15 years ago, but so far we cannot use aerial application. And then Phytophthora looks like Dodistroma from there. That is totally different agent. We discovered with the South African team from Fabi. I don't know if you know that, but we were working together in that research, and we discovered that was massive. So we have about 60,000 hectares with damage. That was about 10 years ago. So you can see here brown trees, and that was scaring. So you need to be careful with this, because if you have areas with high humidity, you can get that. This starts with this band we call Resinus Band, because you can get a lot of resin here. It's like a damage in the tissue, right? So if you see under the light, the sunlight, you can see like a transparent space. And in those space where we got the band, you can see the fruiting bodies. So this is a typical Phytophthora Phytophthora, or what is the name of the Pythium fruiting bodies, but this is Phytophthora pinifolia. The control that we can use here is use tolerant clones. Here we select tolerant clones. We use fungicide before planting. We apply in nursery. We cannot apply in the field. And then after planting, we use fertilizer, phosphate. So we have a map in this case with risk areas. I can talk about that in other occasion, because it's a lot of information, but we have a map where we select areas with high risk or with low risk. And we plant eucalyptus in high risk areas, but we plant pine in areas with middle and low risk to get the infection. And then it's important, probably, because come from Europe, Neonectia fouqueliana, that in Pinus radiata at least produce flood canker. Very impressive. You lose the most important piece of the tree, the area that we prune for the most valuable product that we produce for veneers, for panels. So we lose that part. After you prune, you start to see the deformations in the stem. So then you can see the fruiting bodies, typical ones, beautiful, but very scary, because you can see a lot of deformation. And the only way to have a good control is to prioritize the pruning in dry seasons. So if you prune today that is raining, it's a disaster, because as soon as you prune when it's raining, you get the infection. Not in the whole plantation distribution, but especially in the south where we have more rain. So in humid areas, we can get that infection very easy. New Zealanders, they got exactly the same problems with Phytophthora, with Neonectia. And then some pests like Cyrex. I don't know if you have Cyrex in Portugal. I guess you have. I'm not sure. But Cyrex noctilio is a wasp that kills the tree. It's a very, very smart insect. They kill the tree, and it's like a natural thinner, because New Zealanders, they realize when they have a thinner trees or plantation, they got more infection or more infestation. Well, this is because Cyrex responds to the stress. So when the tree are stressed, you got Cyrex, and the aggressive is very high. So the only way to have a good control is through biological control with nematode that we need to inoculate on trap trees. And then also it's important to use some biological control agents like Mycorrhiza and Ivalia. We have all of them in the field. The most important control is the nematode. That is very efficient. But the key issue here is the stress level. If you have high density, if you have high level of stress in your plantation, you're gonna get more infestation and more damage. Luckily in Chile, it's not a very important now, but we had a very, very bad years with Cyrex. About 10 years ago, we have a high mortality in our plantation, and we worked very hard to try to inoculate with nematode those trees that were infected. And now we have a 85 or more or less 80 to 85, even 90% of parasitism level. So now is a solved problem, but still in the north area, we can have some Cyrex present. But you can live with them, right? We don't have a huge damage with those with Cyrex in those places. Well, the pest and disease control strategy, those pests and disease that I show you that we have in Chile, we have strategies for all of them. So Fusarium circinatum, after 6 or 7 years working in research in the nurseries, we realize what is the best system to have a good control. And I think we are in a very good way now. It's not totally solved, of course, because you need to live all the time with the problem, but probably is in a better position. We are in a better position now. Cyrex as well, we have a strategy with a very intensive surveillance system, and then with a very intensive biological control process. And pinifolia also is just a very small problem now. Fortunately, we have the protocol and the strategy to have a good control. Those protocols are totally available if some of you need in any times. So we think with those strategy we can deal in a proper way with those pests and disease. Those 3 are just an example of the rest. But also we have some potential threats. This is just a couple of slides. Monocamus alternatus that you have, I guess, in Portugal. We have the strategy to avoid Bursaphalenchus, of course. That Monocamus is not really important, but for Bursaphalenchus, the nematode is really important. So we need to be careful with them. We don't have in Chile, but we're gonna get in the future for sure. The pest and disease, they don't have any boundaries. They don't have barriers, so they can come anytime. We need to be careful as well with Limantre dispar. This is the Spanish people they have, and we have a lot of information from them. Many species from IPS also we are looking for, and then pitch canker. And as I said before, we have Fusarium circinatum, but we don't have pitch canker. So we have the strategy to avoid or to make control against pitch canker, just in case we get the infection. It's important to train people, so we develop different, like a pamphlet, to give to our workers in the field, so they can recognize IPS, Dendroctonus, or Monocamus, or wherever, different species. So we have a program of potential threat, since biological system for identification, molecular identification, to recognition in the field, and also the strategy that we need to use, the expert in the work. So we try to be ready just in case we get those insects or disease in our crops. Just to finalize my presentation, other important topics to consider, maybe some thoughts that I didn't put in my presentation, but I believe are very important to consider, like to evaluate and also implement remote sensing and its many applications they have. We already have in Arauco, we are doing a lot of research to try to use remote sensing like LiDAR and hyperspectral camera, multispectral camera, and so on, even from drones, from aircraft, or from satellites. Always use new technology, such such a nanofertilizer. We are trying nanofertilizer this year, bioherbicides. Many countries, many places have problem to use herbicides. I guess Nuno told me that in Portugal it's difficult to use herbicides like glyphosate or different type of herbicide. Well, here also we have restriction, so we try to use bioherbicide. And of course, biocontrol agents are very important to try to minimize the damage with different pests and disease. To implement a strong surveillance system for pests and disease is crucially important. You can spend $1 million or million euros, euros to have a good quality of genetic material, to have a good silvicultural management. But if you have a pest or disease, you can lose everything. So to have a good surveillance system is to have like a insurance. To implement as well a disease-tolerant clone selection program also is important. You can escape actually from some of the problem. In some cases, you cannot do anything, but in many of them, you can have a good support with those clones that can tolerate a disease, for instance. And the last, to evaluate impact in productivity and under climatic change scenarios. We have some examples with pest and disease to see or understand what we in what position we're going to have in 20 or 50 years more, but also what about the productivity of our plantation under climatic change scenarios. I think those topics are also important, but we need probably another hour to talk about them. So this is my talk. Thanks, obrigado, gracias for your attention.
Okay, let me just open this. Thank you, Rodrigo. It was a very interesting presentation. We have here some questions in the Q&A that I would like you to ask you for. So just the first one is regarding the production of any tall oil from Pinus radiata. Is it does anyone do it in Chile?
Excuse me, I didn't hear clearly. Could you repeat, please?
Someone is asking.
What?
Yes, someone is asking if in Chile you produce tall oil from Pinus radiata. I think it was supposed to be the gum resin. I'm not sure. Tall oil. Do you know, Teresa? No. You don't know also, Rodrigo. So perhaps the
no. It's a sub-product from the paper mills.
Oh.
What is that?
A sub-product from the paper mill, but this is a very specific question. I'm not sure if Rodrigo knows it. Let's change to productivity, and we will try to get this information, and we will try to upload it in the presentation. I think it's easier. Regarding the high productivity systems in the 25 years of rotation that you mentioned. Regarding the final density of the 500 hectares per plant, they are asking about what is the average diameter at breast height, the height or the volume. Perhaps you can also share about some productivity regarding this Pinus radiata most productive clones and areas that you have, the average productivity, just for us to have an idea on how is Chile achieving.
No.
Yes,
I don't know
Rodrigo?
if it happened just to me. Yeah, I don't know if it happened just to me, but the communication was with problems.
No,
So
I will ask you again. Do you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. They are asking about the productivity regarding those high productivity stands of Radiata that you mentioned in the presentation. So what is the average growth in these stands, or the height or the volume, some average figures that you can characterize these stands?
Yeah, we're looking for about 600 to 800 cubic meter.
At final harvest, right?
Yes,
okay.
At 25 years old. So when we got, if we have a rotation of 25 years old, we're looking for around 600 to 800 cubic meter in the high productivity side. Most of the time, because it's difficult to have a high productivity side, but most of the time we have less. 500 cubic meters, 600 cubic meters is quite good as well. But if we have on those trees with very high productivity, with good management, with good site, we can get until 800.
Okay. And then
so excuse me, remember that we use a index, site index, right? The site index means that we measure the height of the taller trees, the 100 tallest trees. So if the site is, for instance, 34, that means that the average of the height is 34 meters at the age of 20 years old. So we expect in a site of index 34, we expect to have about 35, 36 meters in height, in at least 100 or 200 trees, right? So it's quite good high, 35, 36 meter, and the diameter could be 50 to 60 centimeters DHB.
Okay. And then Antonio Oliveira, this is a Portuguese colleague, is asking if Pinus radiata doesn't have the ability, like our maritime pine, of auto self-pruning. So why don't you plant the stands with a higher density in order to promote that self-pruning? Because pruning is an expensive operation. So I think radiata doesn't have that the same ability than maritime pine, right, Rodrigo?
Yeah, we don't have well, actually, we don't have like a natural prune. We must prune the trees, and one of the key important issue is to avoid big branches. So we need to be careful with the size of the branches. So we have a diameter, a maximum diameter in the branches to prune. If it's too big, we're gonna have damage in the central knob, in the central cylinder, right? So we try to prune early in the rotation at 5, 6, and 7 years old, just to avoid the growth of the branch, because we don't have natural prune and we don't have soft prune. It's a quite intensive activity.
Okay. And regarding your tree breeding program, how much was the genetic gain? So how much have you achieved in the yield growth with using those best breeding plants that you also mentioned?
Yeah, well, it's not my field, but I know the information. In the beginning, the goal was to get 20 to 40% of gain in terms of selective family, the best families. And then 20% of gain from those best family to clonal material. So we supposed to get about 50% at least extra volume by genetic selection material. So from normal families, open pollinated families, to close pollinated families, and then clonal material, we get about 50% extra volume.
Okay.
So if you see the old plantation, you have a very regular trees. Now we don't have a just one side, right? We have a irregular growth, but in volume they are very similar in DHB, in diameter. Okay. So at least it's more uniform plantations. And also it's important the quality of the fiber. So we have very good growth, but also the quality of the fiber is important. So we look for more density in terms of fiber.
Okay, interesting. And someone else is also asking if you have any forest fire problems in Chile regarding the radiata pine, and how do you do to tackle that issues? And because in Portugal, as you know, now it's summer, and we have in this particular year we are under a huge drought, and now in this week with very high temperatures and low humidity, so the fires are already a serious issue. So how do you tackle that in Chile, and do you have problems? That's the question.
Well, we have a lot of fire problem here. In 2017, we have probably the largest fire problem in the history of our country, with more than 100,000 hectares burned. And that was, the fire problem was for 2 months, and we cannot stop the progress of the fire from the north to the south. And after that, I don't know if you remember the graph, but we produce like 55, 57 million plants, because we need to replant most of the area that were burned. So what happened in our company and also in the country is we invest a lot of money in fire control, prevention. So one of the pruning that we made is auto protection. We call auto protection because we clean 50 meters from the main ways. The roads, right? So the roads, we clean about 25 meters to 25 meters to 50 meters. We prune and we try to eliminate all the waste, right? All the branches and all the waste from the pruning to avoid fire or any fire situation. One of the problems that we have in the last years is that people make fire. We don't have natural fire here. We don't have lightning and these kind of things. It's just people that make the fire. And we have a lot of problems with some communities, for instance. They don't like forestry company. They want to destroy forestry company, so they make fire. So we have 1,000 people working in the field during the summer season, just to check if somebody is working there, somebody is trying to make fire. So fire is an issue, and where we spend a lot of money. So probably $50 million per year or more.
Just for fires.
Unfortunately, we don't have a clone resistant against the fire, but probably we need to try to get a material that can resist the fire.
Let me just receive some other questions. There are some specific questions regarding the Fusarium circinatum. If you know what is the inoculum source of Fusarium circinatum in Chile, if it is required to do seed analysis, yes, then I said yes because I know that. Okay, so do you know the inoculum source of Fusarium circinatum?
From where?
Yes, where it is in Chile, because you found it in the nursery, but not in the forest. So if you know the source.
The source, yes, the source is the soil. So we in the last 5 years we have been working in an evaluation from different sources: water, soils, substrate, that is different with soils, wind, so I mean where it come from, plant, and the whole material in 3 different nurseries. We check every month. We have like 2,000 plates with medium to see where they come from. And 90% of our source is soil under the benches. So where we have the plants for production, under the bench, the soil that is there is with Fusarium, and also the substrate with plants. So probably Fusarium come into the container, and then with the irrigation, some of the spores go down to the soil under the benches. And there is where we have the most important source of Fusarium. So we have a strategy to clean that, to avoid weed under the benches, because that's help to keep alive the Fusarium. And then we use some natural product for cleaning that, like a disinfectation, right? We don't use fungicide, we use like a sanitary product just to clean that, like a salts and other product. And when we realized of that 3 years ago, we reduced the mortality of our production from 8.7% to 0.1. So in the last 3 years, we have not more than 0.1 mortality in our production. And that is really, really important. So hello, Elena. She is a good friend from Portugal. She made some of the questions, right?
Yes, it was there.
Yeah.
And it's 4:20. Professora Teresa, do you have any question that you would like to ask Rodrigo?
No. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation you made. It was very informative. Thank you for being here.
Okay, so we have just one follow-up question. It's more almost like a political one, which is regarding this kind of silviculture, of high productivity stands and short rotations. This webinar viewer, Javier, is saying that this is not aligned with this new way to see the silviculture to fight against climate change, at least in the EU policy. So, what do you think about this, or how it is the situation or the context in Chile? Just wood plantations and woods are a tool to tackle climate change, with
Yeah.
wood sequestration and all of that?
Yeah, very nice question. I think it's very important to understand clearly what happened with climatic change. Climatic change is not related with native forests. Climatic change is related with vegetation. So what we need, and because climatic change is related with also with carbon stocking. So if we keep vegetation, natural, exotic, or whatever, we're gonna help for carbon stocking. That help a lot to climatic change. So this is why it's important, the carbon stocking right now. You know, you can sell bonus of carbon. So we in Chile, at least, we are not allowed to cut native forests. If you remember the evolution of plantation, since 1944, we have more or less the same area with native forests, between 15 million to 14.7 million hectares with native forests. The only area that in Chile is allowed to use plantations, exotic plantation, is in those areas with a high degradation, like areas that come from the crops, agricultural crops. They are really degraded, especially the soil. So it's in those areas we use plantations. So exotic plantation and monoculture, we plant in those areas, not in where we have native forests. So what happened with the silviculture, with high productivity, is two things. We have a more stock of carbon, and that helped to reduce the impact in climatic change. And with what we need to use, we need to avoid the fire, of course, and probably monoculture can facilitate the movement of the fire. But also we have regulation in terms of distribution of our plantation. We cannot plant more than 200 hectares with the same species. So we need to combine different species. So I think it's better to have more plantation than just agricultural crops with high degradation level. So another thing that is important is to try to keep vegetation in good shape, in good condition, to have less water loss, you know. So I think if you are with a good production, you will not affect negatively to the climatic change. Where we are very worried about that, because people think that plantation sometimes produce more damage to climatic change, and what we need to keep is vegetation. I think it is crucially important.
And Rodrigo, one final question that has just now popped up. If you have within your forest plantations or silvicultural models, mixed plantations of radiata with other species, or it's just pure stands of radiata?
Well, yeah, we don't mix in one stand radiata with eucalyptus, because in operational way it's too difficult to management. They have different size, different condition, so we don't mix that. But we normally do is to have small areas with one type of crop, like I said before, 200 hectares, right? And then other species, and then pinus, and then eucalyptus, native forest, pinus, eucalyptus, whatever. but we don't have plantation like eucalyptus mixed with pinus. It's just because it's not really operational system.
Yes, yes, of course. So if we don't have any more questions, we are almost closing our time. So I'll take this final minute just to once again thank you, Rodrigo. It was a pleasure to hear you, and we always learn with you. I know that the webinar is not the same as being in person with you, but it was always a good time to know and to learn about the Chile experience and the Arauco experience in managing the radiata pine. Also to thank IUFRO for supporting Centro PINUS with all of this process, and again my colleagues at Centro PINUS, Susana, which is also at the back office managing and organizing all of that. Susana, also thank you, and to all the participants. So you can have the opportunity to watch it on YouTube, and to in a couple of days, I'm not sure, but you will get the opportunity to also to get the presentation of Rodrigo. Okay. So once
Thanks
again,
for the invitation.
thanks a lot. Oh, it was a pleasure, Rodrigo.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Teresa. Bye, Susana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.